Hello again, Corey Lansdell here with another video. I chose to do another video capture of working on a piece that I put up recently on my Instagram. I haven't been as busy or productive, I suppose is a better word, lately on my Instagram feed for the past week and a bit. It's been a little bit busier, just life in general. Things have been picking up. We had some birthdays and stuff in the family and things to celebrate. And also things at work are picking up a little bit, which is good. We've been working through a number of administrative pieces, trying to get working towards some new opportunities for some work. The great thing is a lot of those opportunities that are coming in our door right now fit perfectly in line with where we want to go as a company, specifically for Pulp Studios Incorporated. We're making an effort, or we have been over the past year and a half or 2 years, to push into more specifically motion graphics and animation as a company. It's a really perfect fit and a perfect spot for us as a company because it brings in all of our skill sets. So there's the storytelling aspect, there's the illustration aspect, there's the animation component, and it also ties in design in a lot of cases where we're bringing in motion graphic elements and text. So it's been really wonderful, and we've been working with some really tremendous contractors to work on a lot of these the heavier animation pieces. Animation is great. I love doing it when I do it. It's just very time consuming, and I love working with people who specialize in it and can just knock stuff out of the park in a much more expedient fashion than myself or my business partner. We excel at the story aspect and the artwork, backgrounds, character designs, and things like that. And that's where our skill sets fit the best. And then, of course, just managing the projects and making sure everything runs as smooth as possible. Anyhow, so in with everything that's been going on, I just haven't been able to get as much done on my stories as I'd like to. However, I have been able to spend some time thinking about The Drift Horse, which is another story that I'm working on. It's turning into, I think it's going to turn into quite an interesting little story. Focuses on a girl and a horse. I can't remember if I've already mentioned this. Forgive me if I'm being redundant. But anyways, I think I've come to a good conclusion in terms of how I want to tell the story and the voice of the story, the main aspects of the story that I want to touch on, and how I'm going to kind of deliver those things. So that's great. I need to sit down and do some more work on that one. I'm about halfway through the first draft of Possum Awesome at the moment, and I'm probably going to do 2 drafts in 2 different veins. So I've got quite a bit of work to do there. And I need to get moving on that as quick as I can, as much as possible. In the meantime, another fun thing that's come through Pulp Studios Incorporated is that we have the potential to land a job writing a 60-page comic book for a client. So in this case, we wouldn't be doing the artwork. We'd probably be helping with layouts and maybe some character design aspects and things like that. But the budget doesn't really allow for us to do the art and to write it, to hire a writer and for us to do the art. But in this case, what we're thinking of doing is we'll write it and we'll hire an artist to do the artwork. And so I'm kind of excited about that. Kelly and I have been working on a graphic novel, an all-ages graphic novel, for the past while, since it's just over a year now, since May of last year of 2015, and I'm actually going to talk about that a little bit today because it ties into my stories, into the journey of kind of where I'm at with my children's book work. But we've been working on a script it's a lengthy script and it's going to end up being, in the end, what we're hoping to produce is 3 story arcs, all set in a world that we're inventing, and centering around a number of characters. Each story arc would kind of focus on one of 3 main characters' sort of journeys. The first story is the one we're working on right now, is about a one-armed knight named Einabrow, and his basically his journey from well, I'm not going to go into details. That's too much. But it's going to be really, really fun. It's ridiculous. It's basically like if Mega Man and Monty Python had a child, you would kind of end up with where Ina Brow lands. So anyhow, in May of 2015, we had the opportunity, well, Kelly had the opportunity, my business partner, Kelly Mellings, had the opportunity to go down to the Toronto Comic Arts Festival to promote the book, the graphic novel that he had just finished illustrating for Native Counselling Services of Alberta with Patty Labokane Benson, who is a brilliant lady. She runs the Native Counselling Services of Alberta, and the book itself is called The Outside Circle. I'll put a link in the notes to this video, but you should definitely check it out. It has some pretty eye-opening content in it. It's really cool. What she did was she took her PhD dissertation and she turned it into a graphic novel story instead of putting it in a book that would live in the halls of academia somewhere. Anyhow, it's been getting very good reviews. Kelly's had a lot of opportunities to do a lot of cool things through it. But in May of last year, I tagged along as Kelly went down to TCAF, and we had set up ahead of time a couple of meetings with some publishers. One being the children's book arm of the publishing company that the graphic novel was published through, Groundwood Books. And we met some wonderful people there and presented our portfolio out of Pulp Studios. And also I pitched my story, Our 1984 Shelter, to them. Basically had a rough manuscript completed and two or three pages of finished art, and then some roughs. The whole thing roughed out, kind of like a very loose book dummy. So I presented it to them. We presented our art, and I presented that book to them. At that time, they felt that the artwork wasn't in line with something that they would publish, that it wouldn't fit in their list, a little bit too cartoony. And so prior to that meeting, we had met with Owl Kids Books as well, and had a wonderful meeting there. Same pitch, basically, just showed them our work and chatted with them about my book and what we do. And they were very interested in Our 1984. So I ended up working with an editor there to work the script over a number of times. I think we went through 3 editing passes essentially. Now this is I'm new at this, so I don't know what sort of is typical. But we went through 3 editing passes, and she worked with me to kind of try and steer the story in a good direction. And it turned out in the end that they weren't, it's something that they weren't willing to pick up yet at this point in time. The major criticisms were that the story is, for Owl Kids, it came down to essentially that they felt like it wasn't something that they would publish, that it's too comic book feeling. So the book itself is it's set up right now as a very sparse on words, almost like a wordless picture book, but it's almost sequential art in a way. I've got stuff online that you can look at where you can kind of get a feel of what I'm talking about, but they just felt it was almost too close to a comic book rather than a children's picture book. And then I took the book back to Groundwoods, and I asked them, I said, I've gone through a few passes with another editor, would you like to take a look at it again? And they welcomed the opportunity to look at it, and so I sent the book and stayed there for I think 4 or 5 weeks, and then Sheila got back to me, and she was very complimentary of the artwork, and she just said that essentially the book wouldn't fit on their list. And so I essentially have 2 rejections. It was my first experience with rejections. But the great thing is, in both cases, I reached out to them post Rejection, and just, touched base, and I thanked them very much for their time, and for them to take the time to work with me, to review my work, and to chat with me about, where they could see things improving or changing. And in the case of Groundwood, I had some great feedback about how the story doesn't really progress the characters enough, that there's a lot of really fun, exciting action that they feel would be excellent in terms of imagined. So, children would really buy into it. There's a lot of imagined play in there and some really fun things that happen. And they thought that was great. And there's a relationship between two primary characters that's like cooperative, and they're siblings, and that's wonderful. And oftentimes they'll find sort of relationships between siblings involving conflict, but it's more about them resolving conflict together, which is interesting. So they were very interested in those aspects. They just felt there wasn't enough character development. And so, I asked in my email, can I pitch this back to you if I rework it? And they're very open to that, and also very open to me potentially working on some other books. So they're going to keep me on a list. If opportunity arises that I could illustrate someone else's book. So I feel like, yeah, I've received rejections, but it doesn't feel like a closed door. It feels like a foot in the door. And it's funny how all this stuff goes together. I mean, Kelly and I invested a lot into The Outside Circle, the graphic novel that he worked on over 2 years at the company. There's a lot of sacrificed time on his end. He spent a lot of time in the production of that while I managed other things at the studio. There was some crazy, difficult personal stuff that we both were going through on different levels, and it just kind of took a lot of perseverance and teamwork to get through all that. And now, on the other side of that is these opportunities, these doors that have opened. And so it's just been really exciting. And I'm excited about the process of where things are going. I feel as though the past month or month and a half here, whatever it's been, 2 months maybe, since I've started kind of playing around with the watercolors
awesome.
again, and trying to
Peace
find
out.
my voice again as an illustrator. It's kind of reminded me a little bit about the process of creating art, and not just and illustration, and not just sort of commercial work, which I do all the time. In my regular day-to-day work, we create a lot of commercial work, which is fulfilling in different ways. I find a lot of joy in helping people realize their visions and communicate specific messages, and it's a wonderful process to be a part of, and it's rewarding in different ways. But there's something different about doing art, and it got me thinking about, why do we draw? And so, why do I draw? Why does anybody create art? And as kids, we all create art. It just is. We just do. We draw stuff. We doodle. We want to, play in that way, in a creative way. And it's, for me as a kid, it was, it was a form of exploration of my world, of thoughts and ideas. Brought me a lot of joy. It brought me close to my brother. We spent tons of time drawing together. I mean, my dad, as well, has an artistic background. He never took any formal classes, but he's a talented guy. He did a lot of painting, and so art would bring us together in that respect too. It was also a form of escape from life's stresses and the challenges of growing up. And then that, over time, for me, in high school, it was an escape. It was like what got me through all my sort of weird teen years. And it's always been, the process of creating art has always been for me a necessity, an essential part of of who I am. And now, like I said, out of work, through the company, I create art oftentimes out of necessity to provide for the family and to make ends meet. And it's very much more work, and it's task oriented, and it's process oriented, and very specific. And as I've been working on these pieces and getting back to using watercolors and traditional media, and just sitting and spending some time in that, I've found that I'm living in that process more, and I'm finding a fun, there's fun in that time, there's joy in it, and there's a release from stress. And it's like it feels a lot like when I was a kid. I'm finding myself kind of being captured by my ideas and drawn into them, and I feel as though I'm drawing for myself. And in that process, I end up drawing like myself, which got me thinking about style. And I think that there's a interesting process that we as artists, and I think specifically in the kids' book universe, I'm kind of getting a view of that as I do a lot of research and look at other people's work, is that stylistically there's like a voice that illustrators find, and I feel as though I'm getting close to finding that voice. It's interesting, in our work at Pulp Studios, we try all the time to make sure that we're fluctuating style based on the needs of a project. And so we're constantly creating stuff that's of different stylistic approaches, which is kind of takes us into a constant process of relearning things. We're constantly having to relearn, how are we going to manufacture this? There's a little bit of the technical side, like, are we going to do this all digital? Will it entail, analog and digital? Will it look like this artist or that artist? And that's a pretty fun process. Kelly is very good at that. He handles a lot of the art direction at Pulp Studios, and so I kind of follow his lead in that respect. But it's presents a lot of interesting challenges, and it's one of our mandates is to kind of tailor our style to the specific needs of a project. Now, when I'm working on this stuff, I'm finding that what's happening is I'm discovering where am I comfortable and what do I enjoy doing. And man, do I ever enjoy what I've been doing lately. It's been very fun. And in that, I end up drawing for myself and like myself, and that's a great joy. I was just looking through some books that I'd picked up, some children's books the other day, just for research purposes, and I was at Indigo, and I came across Ish by Peter H. Reynolds. Some of you may recognize it, but it's a very interesting little story about Ramon, this young boy who loves to do art. And he's sitting at the table one day and drawing a flower pot or a vase with flowers in it. And his brother comes along and laughs, and he's like, "What the heck is that?" And then he goes on this sort of mission of wanting to prove that he can draw stuff, and he draws and draws and draws, but he just can't find it. He can't seem to make it look right. And so he ends up giving up and putting his pencil down. But then right away his sister comes along, and she drags him to her room, and she's got all of his crumpled illustrations up on her wall, and he's like, "Wow, it is." She's kind of saying, like, it's vase-ish, like it kind of looks like a vase, and there's some wiggly lines in there. He feels energized, and he ends up drawing all this art, and he ends up doing poetry and figuring out he can draw his feelings, and then one morning he just has a wonderful feeling, and he decides not to do anything about it, not to capture it, but just to enjoy it. And he, it's at the end is like he lived ishfully ever after. And at the end of the book, there's a dedication. It says, "Dedicated to Doug Cornfield, my art teacher, who dared me to draw for myself and find my voice." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's great." And I mean, I feel like that's kind of what I'm going through, and realizing that stuff doesn't need to be perfect, and my art is never really going to be perfect. I'm never going to be 100% content with what I've created, I don't think. I think that's sort of the curse of being an artist, is that over time I'm going to create stuff, and that process and what I produce will probably constantly evolve. I might end up finding myself in a place where I'm frustrated with something, so I'll end up going in a different direction and then exploring different approaches to things. And I think as an artist, that's sort of the excitement of being an artist, is that there's opportunity to grow and change, but at the same time, letting go of the fact that, I'm not going to draw like Phil Noto. He's an amazing comic book artist, and he has beautiful sort of painted comic book work, and I really admire it. I'm not going to draw like him. I'm going to draw like me. And so I need to, or Dan Santat, for example, he's incredible, does incredible work, and I really admire it. I'm not going to be that guy. I'm going to be me. And so, I need to find, I'm just kind of finding, I guess, that comfort in, there's comfort in knowing that I need to adjust my expectations essentially and not get, hell bent on making it look perfect, but making it look ish. Just kind of inspired, this book inspired me in that respect. I think there's a great message in it. Um, Now, obviously, I think that's what that is doing is giving me a vision of like a tempered approach to this work, and it's important because I want my work outside of what I'm pursuing at Pulp Studios to continue to be a source of joy and escape and release. And once I start to push myself to the point where I'm frustrated and getting angry with my work, I think that joy is going to escape me. And that's not to say I'm not going to finish stuff and I'm not going to be purposeful about my time. I just have to be aware that I'm in process, and that my art is in process. And so it's a wonderful sort of release. This piece that you're watching unfold here is one that in the end I was not happy with. I overworked the watercolors and they ended up a little muddy, and then I ended up going back into them to try and save them with integrating some acrylics into the piece to try and pull some lightness back out, because the piece it ended up feeling a little flat because the colors just ended up muddy, and part of it is just understanding how watercolors work and letting the medium do its job a little bit and not trying to overwork it and overhandle it. So, I mean, this piece is, I don't hate it. And actually, as I look at it now, I'm like, oh, it's not bad. I kind of enjoy it actually. I think there's learning in it. I did an online class with Giuseppe Castellano. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's a senior art director at Penguin Random House, and he's the founder of the illustration department, illustrationdepartment.com. It was a really great short little workshop with a couple of other creators, and we basically had some one-on-one Skype time with Giuseppe talking about the business of illustration. One of the things that stood out to me was he gave us this little test to do, which I didn't realize it was a test at the time, but he asked us to draw a box and a circle and then a square and a circle, and then later on we looked at them, and each one of us had just drawn simply a square and a circle beside each other. And we showed him our drawings, and he kind of chuckled and he said, "You all failed." And I was like, "Oh no, ah!" You want to make a good impression on this person who is working in the industry, and I sort of felt like I failed the test. What he said in relation to that is that the snippet I took out of it was, "They're looking for thinkers," and he basically was encouraging us to, if somebody gives you a job, don't just do what the bare minimum is required. Don't just draw a square and a circle. Add some character in there, bring some life into it. And I think that I wrote that on my square circle page and I stuck it on my wall. So I've got this square circle page on my wall and it says they're looking for thinkers on it. And I'm trying to kind of always look back at that and remember that. It's important for me as I move forward in creating these stories that, and I've seen it already with these two rejections, that they're looking for more than just pretty art or an exciting story. They want to see something they want something that's going to tell something important, and it's going to reveal something about life, I think, to the audience. And that's what I'm trying to grasp and trying to move towards. And so as I work on my stories, I'm actually excited about the feedback that I've had, and I'm excited about the direction that I'll be able to move with those. So as you can see, this piece wrapped up, and I think it turned out okay. I put it up here even though it's not my favorite piece, and I don't feel like it was a quote-unquote success, because I told you guys I was going to share everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I would say that this is somewhere in between the good and the bad. I wouldn't call it ugly, but I think there's learning in it, and I think it's valuable. I think it has great value for what I'm trying to achieve. So I hope that you enjoyed watching the art piece, even though it may not be my favorite piece. I hope you enjoyed watching the process, and I hope that something I've said, sparks some kind of interest for you. If you're interested in some of the things that I've mentioned, I'll put some links in the description and you can search those out on the web. So thanks very much. I look forward to sharing more down the road. I've got another simple video that I want to put together that I'll be putting up hopefully sooner than later. And I'm going to continue working on my manuscript, and I will share progress as it is made. So thanks very much, guys, for listening, and I hope you have a very wonderful day, and create for yourself, do art for yourself, and in that you'll find joy, and you might just find motivation towards doing something bigger and more awesome than you thought that you could do. So that's the message for today, and I hope you guys have a great one.